Welcome to the Wellness at Work podcast, brought to you by the Learning and Development Projects at Silberman School of Social Work, Hunter College. This is a series of conversations designed to inspire wellness in helping professionals. Our conversations will focus on understanding the importance of self-care, reducing trauma, and bringing to listeners new ideas and practices that promote wellness at work and in your professional life. Welcome to our show today.
Hello, I'm very delighted to say that Victoria Ferguson-Young, who is a Victim Services Coordinator at the National Clearinghouse on Abuse in Later Life, has joined me today to have a conversation about elder abuse and other issues that surround elder abuse and the what affects the quality of life for older people later in their lives. Victoria develops and delivers training and technical assistance to OVW Abuse in Later Life grant program recipients and service professionals from across the country. With over 15 years in domestic violence advocacy, prevention, and education, she holds degrees from Howard University and Morehouse School of Religion, and is based in Atlanta, Georgia. I'm so happy. Victoria, welcome.
Thank you so much, Geoff. I'm so glad to be here. I really appreciate the invitation.
So we're going to dive in. Victoria, share the folks a little bit about your work and describe, and then let's talk about how it overlaps with the work we do at Silberman.
Sure, absolutely. So you started to touch on things. I am the Victim Services Coordinator at the National Clearinghouse on Abuse in Later Life, also known as NCALL. To tell you a little bit more about me and how I got into this work briefly, I have been doing this advocacy work, as I said, for over 15 years. I started as a safe house advocate. I've been a legal advocate. I've worked on the accountability side with family violence and intervention programs. And then had the opportunity to be a project coordinator for the grants that I now work to oversee at NCALL. So in the Atlanta area, I implemented that grant and really worked on building out services and resources for older adult victims of violence. And so to tell you a little bit more, about NCALL in particular, and why NCALL was started, why NCALL and the work that we do is important. So in 1999, NCALL was started to really address the needs that first, there are over 11,400 adults who are turning 65 every day, and there are only one in 24 cases of elder abuse are ever being reported. NCALL was created because of the fact that most domestic violence sexual assault agencies really are not equipped or trained or ready to serve older adult victims, and also because those agencies, victim service agencies, aging services, adult protective services, and criminal justice system departments, law enforcement, prosecutors, oftentimes are not really working together to really meet the needs of older adult victims. And so, or they're oftentimes working in silos. So NCALL was created to bridge those gaps, to better equip communities, to improve services for older adults, to reach more older adults, and especially the most vulnerable older adults that are victims of violence. And for us to support communities in doing that work. So that's what makes NCALL unique. And so we're a training and technical assistance provider. Technical assistance being that we provide targeted, specialized support, expert guidance to these grantees to really work with them to solve, the challenges of reaching older adults, of improving their services, of bridging gaps, of having a coordinated community response. And so we do a lot of trainings with them. We also develop curriculums, many resources as well. So from virtual in-person trainings and much more. So that gives you just a little bit of framework about NCALL. And so we are also an initiative of the End Domestic Abuse Wisconsin Coalition, so the Wisconsin-based Domestic Violence Coalition
Oh,
as well. And but we do, serve the country nationally, and we are OVW, or the Office on Violence Against Women. That's a department in the Department of Justice. We are their only technical assistance provider on the Abuse in Later Life program.
One of the things that it occurs to me, and this is a bit of a digression and something to think about, is the distinction between abuse in later life and elder abuse.
Yes, yes. I'm so glad that you asked. Yep.
Okay, good.
Yeah, so there's a lot to say there. And so I was just wanted to explain that as well, because sometimes the terms are used interchangeably, or that
Yeah,
they're the
yeah.
same, but they are different. And so, but I will say that abuse in later life is a subset of elder abuse. So all abuse in later life is a type of elder abuse, but all elder abuse is not abuse in later life. So to just kind of hone in more on that, abuse in later life, first and foremost, focuses on adults who are 50 and over. So that really expands, part of that definition. Sometimes various states will have different ages of what's considered an elder or an older adult, maybe 60, maybe 65 or 55 or even 70 in some states. So that really varies as to how old someone has to be in order to be considered, an elder, an older adult, or if they are a victim of crime that is considered an elder abuse or abuse in later life crime. But for our work, again, it's 50 and over. So why is that in particular? Because those individuals who are 50 to 61 really fall out of a lot of the social service supports that are provided in our country. So, they're typically aged out of having the opportunity to receive benefits for those with dependent children, but they're not quite old enough for Medicare or Social Security or even Aging Service Network programs. So, that's another reason. And then additionally, what we know is that for many victims of abuse in later life, they live on the margins. They are those who are, who may be living in poverty, who may have limited access to healthcare, who may be living with historical trauma, and they oftentimes have shorter life expectancies. So for there to be a more focused outreach to that particular age range, for that reason, that we're really intentional about reaching the most vulnerable victims, older adult victims, those who living with disabilities as well, may have shorter life expectancies if they've lived with a disability their whole life. So those are the reasons why our work starts at those who are 50 and older.
So I want to circle back also to the distinction. You said that you thought that abuse in later life is a subset of elder abuse. And my feeling has been for a while that it's the other way around, that the big picture is DV.
Oh, it is. Yeah. Yeah.
And
there's
then both of those
Yeah.
are subsets of that. I mean, I am probably going to get a lot of trolling for saying that, but I think, I've been having discussions with people like you and a colleague of mine who she's a former deputy commissioner over DV at the New York City Human Resources Administration. And as soon as I said that, she said yes, and then it was just like, okay. And so, what are your thoughts about that? That big picture is DV, and then within that is elder abuse, and I don't how you prioritize those two, abuse in later life.
Yeah, so great question. We see it as it's really a nexus of elder abuse, sexual assault, and domestic violence.
Oh,
What
interesting.
makes abuse in later life unique is also that it is very much inclusive of non-intimate partner violence, right? So it may be family members who are other family members, especially children or adult children, who are committing acts of violence or abuse against an older adult. And so that's really abuse in later life focuses on that trust-based, ongoing trust-based relationship. Whereas elder abuse it considers and includes stranger scams, sweetheart scams, phone scams. Our work does not cover that. So that's not where our focus is for our work and what we're funded to do. Additionally, we also don't include self-neglect. So for those older adults who are unable to take care of themselves, that's not not that's not under our definition as well. But that is a part of elder abuse as well. So that's really the main distinction why we say that it's a part of elder abuse. So all these facets of abuse in later life,
Yeah.
and all the different types of abuse, with the exception of what I just said from the scams, like sweetheart scams and phone scams, which are very much a part of, that many older adults are suffering from,
Yes.
as well as the self-neglect is outside of that umbrella. But there are some states, which abuse in later life includes those things. But for us at NCALL, how we've defined it, and that's also, what we're funded to be able to work on is another distinction there. That's how
Right.
That's how we define it. And those are the distinctions that we focus on. But it is inclusive of physical, sexual, emotional, psychological abuse, and then financial exploitation and neglect. And I really do want to just highlight the emphasis on neglect and financial exploitation, because those are oftentimes the most prevalent types of abuse that older adults will experience, which is very different from younger individuals. We don't see that often with younger individuals like we do with older adults.
So you touched on culture. And how does culture impact the trajectory of abuse in later life?
Well, it can in so many ways, because our culture and what we experience, the identities that we have, really speaks to intersectionality, and how the interlocking systems of oppression that many older adults live with, and that many people in general have, but marginalized identities or more vulnerable identities that can compound and make someone's vulnerability and susceptibility to abuse to be much worse. That's a significant factor that we focus on in our work surrounding abuse in later life.
Can you give an example of that?
Yeah, sure. So, if an older adult is a person of color, is an immigrant that has limited English proficiency and identifies as being gay, their lived experience of coming to this country, maybe not being and difficulty with language access, can make them to be much more dependent on others, or just more vulnerable to abuse. They may not have had the access to work or resources that others who are native U.S. citizens, who are not immigrants, have had. And so over time, these things compound and can make someone, they may not have, because of, maybe having difficulty acquiring solid or secure work, be able to have good health care, which can also lead to, being impoverished. And then, as I stated earlier, can lead to just an increased vulnerability for abuse. Whereas if they develop a health issue because their health changes and they're dependent on, a family member or someone, that can leave them more susceptible to abuse, or even just having insecure housing. We've seen in recent years also just a rise in homelessness.
Oh, wow.
Adults. So, these are not typically like things that just happen quickly, it's over time how these various challenges or even barriers or identities that some older adults have, because of how our society, and I don't want to say that anyone's identity is wrong or a problem, of course, but based on how our society may treat someone who's an immigrant, or someone who has limited English proficiency, or who's been unable to secure this employment for a long period of time, to have financial security, how that compounds and impacts their quality of life later, and how they can be much more vulnerable to abuse. And one other point I just want to mention is, for those older adults who did work for years and years and years, for people who maybe are aging into a disability, maybe they've had a stroke, at 70 or 75, and now they are dependent physically on someone else, and they have acquired a nest egg, or they have been able to retire. They're of the financial exploitation that can be prone to, because of that, it's a risk factor. So there's several ways that that abuse in later life can take place. It doesn't discriminate, so to speak. Can happen to people with more with more resources, but also for those who are most vulnerable, the circumstances can be even more dire.
And what is the impact of gender is there disproportional, or is gender is gender a factor?
Yes, we do see from our research and reports, which are minimal, in that there's not a lot of research on elder abuse or abuse in later life, and victim services. But what we do know is that women are much more likely to be victims of abuse in later life. One of the factors is that women typically do live longer, and so there's again just an increased likelihood for that to continue. For women who are married and when their partner or their spouse dies, if if their financial circumstances change and they may not have the financial security, that can make them more vulnerable as well to abuse. So yes, there is a difference in which we do see an increase, as kind of across the board surrounding victims of violence, that women are often, there's higher rates. But I will say that older adult men are also victims of abuse in later life. We see, I think, most prevalently with adult children or grandchildren, oftentimes.
So, this is really interesting. I think in a bit we're gonna be talking about the impact of ageism.
Yes.
And we can talk a little bit about our collaboration
Oh, yeah.
in terms of the response to an article in the New York Times.
Mhm.
I think, it's so fascinating to me because I think the way you've described it, I guess what I am trying to sort of wrap my head around is the idea that there is these interlocking systems of oppression and impacts
Yes.
that we tend to silo.
Yes.
Elder abuse is here, and abuse in later life is here, and DV is here. But
Right.
all of these things
Yes.
can circle people significantly to have really disproportional negative impacts.
Absolutely. And that's what our work at NCALL is, one of our main focuses are bridging those gaps. The way that
Ah.
the grant is structured, that grantees have, is for multidisciplinary training, where there's training teams of law enforcement
Mm.
and service providers and adult protective services and prosecutors that are working together to train law enforcement, and also in our cross training for multidisciplinary service providers. So, the whole fact is that we have to have a coordinated community response, and that in order
Right.
to effectively address elder abuse and abuse in later life, we can't work in silos, right? There has to be collaboration, there have to be
Right.
partnerships, in order to really provide effective, tailored services that are really meeting the needs of older adult victims. Great
And
point.
I also hear that there's a shared learning that goes on between the multiple parties on a multidisciplinary party. So they're all learning from each other about best ways and best practices.
True, absolutely, absolutely. And that's with our grant program, there's training specifically for each discipline, but there's also a collaborative training, a multidisciplinary training, in which there's multidisciplinary trainers who are training law enforcement, but it is a shared learned experience, in which it's a very interactive training. And then also for some of our other training programs, we do really work to have opportunities to bring together, different multidisciplinary service providers, so that there's more conversations,
Yeah.
in that shared learning piece, so that we're again bridging gaps, so we're not working in silos, because that's not effective. No
Right.
one agency or one discipline can do it all. We have to work together in order to really provide healing and just outcomes for victims.
I think ageism normalizes the abuse of older people. Do you think it has the same impact for abuse in later life?
Absolutely. Absolutely. It is what allows abuse in later life to fester. It's what
Yeah.
allows it to really happen in secret. It's what allows people to think that it's not even an issue. You'd likely be surprised, or maybe not so much because of your work too, that people often don't think that an older adult could be a victim of sexual assault, or they think that older adults
Yeah.
are victims of stalking. Like, why was like no one would do that? Or and that plays a role in services that are provided or the care that older adults receive, because people may not believe them, and that's what really allows them to be targeted even more so by perpetrators, because people think they won't be believed. Or you can just say, oh, that lady's crazy, she doesn't know what she's talking about because she's however 82 years old. And all of that is ageism. Those beliefs, those biases, that type of discrimination is ageism, and that allows abuse in later life and elder abuse to fester and to grow and to be the major health issue that it is.
Oh, I'm so interesting that so ageism, well, I'll start to really upset people by saying that ageism is a social determinant of the health of older people. And because of that's what I heard you say. So that that impacts of ageism have their carryover to the ability for people to age well,
Yes.
would you say?
Yes, it does. It does carry over. That's a really important point to recognize. I mean, there's ageism in healthcare, ageism
Mm,
in the workplace, in what, from healthcare providers who may not even truly diagnose or treat older adult patients because things are just considered normal aging, quote unquote. And so
hmm
it's okay for them, or that, when older adults experience depression, or even the fact that memory loss or dementia is not a normal part of aging, like those are extremes that
Yes.
it's not something that everyone should expect, that once you become a certain age that you should feel lonely, or that you're going to develop dementia or Alzheimer's. But these have become thoughts and normalizations that we have, and that plays a
Yeah.
role from service providers who believe those things too. And it shows up in
Yeah.
how people are cared for and not cared for, and the type of treatment that they receive or what they don't receive. Even when there are practices from other, from even excluding older adults with technology. There's so many, even from government agencies to other types of applications, which are everything only done online. There's not alternative ways. And if older adults are not technological and savvy, they can miss out on opportunities, right? And so these things play a role. And if someone's health declines, if they do seek a decline in health, older adults, and internalized ageism can play a role in which someone may feel,
Mm,
I can't reach out because now this is just what nobody's going to want to
mm,
help me, or I don't want to be a burden to others, or now that I'm 75, I have to just be at home with my cats, or I shouldn't.
mm,
Yeah, I shouldn't be going out all like that anymore, because, and so
mm,
these thoughts that are internalized, that maybe
mm.
someone learned this at 25 and now it's 75, it's playing in their head and it's how they behave and act. But also, of course, those of service providers. So ageism is so pervasive and it's so normalized in our country and in our society that we really oftentimes don't realize that something is ageist. I mean, we see it everywhere in more even what are considered harmless ways, from jokes on cards about you're over the hill
Mm,
to t-shirts. And I mean, it's so pervasive, to anti-wrinkle creams, and you can't say this once you're this age, and these things are thought of to be not that big of a deal, but they truly really impact how we treat older adults,
yeah.
how they're seen, and again, just allows older adults to be even more vulnerable to abuse.
So there's a weird sort of disregard that goes on with that kind of the jokes.
Mhm.
One of the things that I think is really one of the most fascinating things, which is in the beauty industry, again, there's another possibility of a lawsuit, is the idea of anti-aging cream, which is like,
Yes.
uh,
I mean, it's more than just cream, it's some of everything, right?
but the idea, so the other part about that I find that is disproportionate in American society
Mhm.
is the idea that aging is negative,
Yes.
that aging isn't about the acquisition of wisdom or experience and or building of skill, which
Yeah.
is, I guess, part of experience. It's a fascinating thing. So all of this sort of combines, what I hear you're saying is combines and sets the stage for what you were talking about initially, which was the normalization of the disregard, is the leap from the disregard to I can take, I can abuse,
Mhm.
I can disrespect.
Yeah.
It's like a pathway
Yes,
towards the possibility of abuse in later life. Would you say?
absolutely. Absolutely, it is. And again, it starts from what seems to be harmless to very
Right.
egregious forms, of abuse. But it all plays a role in leading to to the abuse in later life that we see, to the fact that this is such an underreported issue. From ageism being I talked about internalized ageism to interpersonal, how it occurs between people and in ways that people say things about older adults and in ways it's like, oh, she's just this age now, so this, and but and that is even, something like that. Those things play a huge factor, to institutionally with, laws and
Yes.
mandatory retirement ages and,
Yes.
older adults, and even just funding for older adult care needs and, um, and also just age-based, cutoffs for things older adults can't do, as well. And the fact that there's even limited research on elder abuse and on abuse in later life. I think we don't see there being an interest in that.
Yeah.
It's like,
Yeah.
oh, but once you get that age, it's
Yeah.
not really seen as an important issue. But what we also know is that the older adult population, that 65 and older, is growing so rapidly. It's the fastest growing,
Yeah.
group.
Yes.
Mhm.
So it's interesting you're saying. So it was exactly what I was thinking about. It's like, well, so longevity is increasing.
It is.
And so it seems to be like, but there are people who want to live forever.
Mhm.
And it's so interesting. It's like, oh, and they don't want to age. They want to live forever, but not
Yes.
age, which is like a fascinating contradiction. And I guess, I don't know what to really think about that, but it's a fascinating thing that we have these kinds of, what would you call it? It's more than myth. It's more like sort of, well, maybe they are these sort of weird. We've created this idea about aging that simply does not parallel what aging actually does, and specifically talking about its benefits.
Yes.
One of the other things, and I heard you were talking about, is the idea that aging, once you're starting to get older, the social connections start to fall away. And I was wondering, within the context of aging, abuse in later
Mhm.
life, what is a factor in terms of social isolation? How does that factor in?
It is a huge part. As human beings, we are social creatures designed to be connected to others. And when those connections diminish, and as people get older, due to the fact that people will pass away, if they're retired and no longer working, that some of the social connections that they've had may diminish. But what we do know is that when that happens, you see an overall decline in someone's health much faster.
Right,
And there is an epidemic of loneliness. I
right,
don't have
right.
data specifically on it, but it is very pervasive, throughout our country, and it's another tactic in abuse as well. Perpetrators will use isolating tactics to
Yeah.
an older adult from contacting friends or family. For many older adults, their faith tradition and their faith community is very important. And they may try to
Hmm.
stop them from going or prevent them from joining, going to other maybe social events, that they would like to go to. And so, over time, of course, these things compound and can really impact one's health for the worse. But the social connection piece, and even when I recently heard a story about an older, gentleman who was experiencing from depression and feeling isolated, and his daughter was very intentional about getting him back involved in his, organizations and community service groups that he was a part of, and also moving him into a assisted living facility or retirement community where he was with other people all the time. And it was is incredible the change of his health, how things improved for him, really from the social connections, from the ability to be connected, and from having consistent social connections that were beneficial to him. Obviously, nothing toxic, but when you have the opportunity to be connected to others on a consistent and ongoing basis, it makes such a huge difference in one's longevity and quality of life too. So yeah, that's a huge factor.
So in media, and we're going to get to in a bit. So there's a funny story. Victoria sent me an article. Did you see this? And I was like, yeah, I did see it. And it was this. The only way I can really describe it is like this ageist diatribe in the New York Times. And we're going to be talking about that.
Yeah.
This was symptomatic of how we decided to collaborate on a response. But, one of the things about ageism that's also specific to how we come together, I'm trying to sort of connect the idea of social connection. So the idea is as you age, you become less relevant or there's the impression, I shouldn't say you become, as you age, there's the impression that you're less relevant, less socially relevant. Yeah. And so that kind of isolation can lead you towards the kinds of manifestations of negative manifestations of health. But then there is also finally, it also, again, sets the stage for the possibility of certainly neglect, and definitely abuse and exploitation. Would you agree with that?
I absolutely agree. And, when you were talking, it was one of the things I just wanted to highlight is how, I think there's a compounded effect that women experience as well. That if you are, once you're past a certain age, once you're past 45 or 50, in your prime, there is this pressure to look in a certain age range, and that, you're supposed to age gracefully, which in a lot of ways is like you're basically diminishing and no longer seen. I mean, when you look at, you're talking about media, when you look at those who are on, news anchors and those who are really, you see prevalently on TV are women in their 20s and 30s, for the most part, maybe even 40s. But, you don't typically see older adult women or those who are 50 and up in roles on television, maybe one or two, but not dominantly. And so, that, whereas I think it's very different with men. And so, so, I mean, that's just another way in which, that society really places this this pressure to look a certain way, and again, in particular for women, it's another compounded effect of ageism and how it shows up, and yet, there's also, and one of the point I want to mention is this, because of that, the pressure on women and the beauty industry, right? And so how much money women are spending to look and to have these anti-aging products and all that you have to meet these beauty standards, and the financial impact that has on so many women. So that later in life, in older adult life, there's more of a financial vulnerability. I mean, there could really add up to be millions of dollars that's in that. And so that is, I mean, there's just so many components. We could really spend all day just looking at the many ways that ageism shows up, and how it really is so pervasive and within our society, and the negative impacts that it has.
So Victoria and I met at the Tamkin Conference, which I think it's every other year. And I was there with the people from a particular project that I'm involved with called Rise. And Victoria and I said hello, and then we started to we ended up in an exercise about having a discussion about what to do about nursing homes, and we had a very interesting response, which we won't go into anymore. But we decided that we wanted to keep in contact and then figure out time to talk and then go from there to see the possible collaborations. So there was this one day, and I actually don't remember what day it was. I was sitting calmly at my desk at home, and I had read this article by this fella who was a law professor at Yale called Samuel Moyn. And it was essentially a prolonged ageist diatribe about older people basically taking all the resources or hoarding all the resources. And all of a sudden there was an email, I think it was a day later, or maybe it was the same day, it was an email from Victoria popped up. Did you see this? And I was like, you can't really say in an email, but and so I said, yeah. And she said, we need to, I think you said, or I don't remember.
Yes.
We both sort of said at the same, but we should do a response to it. Was that your memory?
I think you started writing a response like,
oh yeah, because I was like,
free flowing.
yeah, I was just like, oh, this is
like,
yeah.
let's really work on this. And
yeah. So we workshopped it, and it was interesting because we actually it was a response to this article. And so this guy, as I mentioned before, he's a law professor at Yale University, and it was Victoria. I'm here curious to think but for me, it was like I kept looking at it. I could not wrap my mind around the fact that this had come from somebody who was an academic at Yale.
yeah,
It just was like, I know that sounds elitist, but it was just like, oh my God.
very shocking. And someone who also is, like teaches history and he's written several books on history. And
Yeah.
I think what was most shocking to me, one of the most shocking things, there were several, about this article, I think it's called Gerontocracy, Older Adults Are Hoarding All of the Wealth in America. Um, I'm sure we'll probably link it. But the fact that he starts with talking about ageism and how much of a problem it is, but then, posits and advocates for all of these ageist policies to basically try to like eliminate older adults from
Yes.
having any autonomy or agency or resources or being able to fully participate in life in this country. And that was incredibly shocking. And then ends it with talking about ageism still being a problem, but there was clearly not a cognitive dissonance of how this of of the things that he suggested, of the ways he didn't believe older adults should be in hold elected offices, or should be taxed more for their homes and the their wealth accounts or retirement accounts. Or it just went on and on. It was
it really, I mean, and I will tag this article for people who are interested, and also our response. You can find it on the NCALL website, right?
It's on our website.
And also on the L&D Learning and Development Project's website as well. And we also are in LinkedIn, and we've tagged each other in LinkedIn about this article because it sort of went through other colleagues who were in the field of elder abuse and more broadly in aging. But it was interesting to me that our sense of outrage was so profound that we felt the need to really sort of get together and figure out a response to it. Can you remember what your first reaction was to the article?
I mean, it was really along the lines of what I said. It was shocking of how can someone who has, who is at Yale, who has studied history, who really defined ageism and what it is and its impacts, why it's a problem. Really think that these notions he was suggesting, or that older adults are hoarding all the wealth in America. It also made me think that one of my other first reactions was, well, he must be around like the top 1%. Like he's
Right.
not connected to,
Right.
living with, aware of,
Right.
older adults who are the struggles older adults are facing. We think about all the things we just discussed, the vulnerabilities that older adults have, that yes, there are older adults who have
Yep.
worked and earned, like really, and have achieved what many may call the American dream of, life pursuit, liberty, pursuit of happiness. They're financially independent or retired. They're enjoying their home. And they're able
Right.
to do what they want to do. And so to say that that's a problem, that was incredibly shocking. That,
Yeah.
the fact that it's like these older adults are a problem, right? I mean, it just
Right.
was a glaring example of ageism, and that you don't see older adults as being truly full people, but you are a problem that is taking
Right.
away from the people who are more important, the younger adults.
Right.
You're not important
Right.
anymore. You've already lived your life. Your time has passed. It is now time for the younger adults
For the younger
really
people to
to
live their
support.
best
Yes,
lives.
because
That was
and
just,
so the last thing we need in this country is more division, right? We
right.
don't. We don't need
Exactly.
that. And that is
I think it's
exactly what this article centers on, is dividing and seeking to really conquer the achievements that older adults have, while completely neglecting to recognize the very many struggles that the overwhelming majority of older adults have and that they're living with.
Yes. I mean, that's the thing that I took away. It was offensive to me in terms of the idea that first of all, there's a cabal of rich older people who are keeping everything,
Yes.
which was like, oh, and older people, what I, my reaction to it was, so this guy looks at older people within the context of commercials for like the Viking longship
Mm.
commercials where they're all very comfortable and they're sailing through Europe and having wine
Yes.
and it's just like no, there are older people who are who the cost of living has outstripped
Yes.
their resources and there are no resources to support them.
Yes.
So the idea, while this may seem to be a meme, where you have older people sometimes eating food that they should not be eating or eating the food of pet food, is not to be underestimated. The idea, the concept there that these folks sometimes don't have enough money for medication, sometimes don't have enough money to be able to seek medical care,
Yep.
sometimes don't get, and you talked about this earlier, where they don't have access to people who genuine medical care or health care,
Right.
people who actually know what they're talking about in terms of aging bodies.
Yep. Yep. Exactly. Exactly.
It's just,
It's I mean, all that you said is so true. And the fact that, there's so many things that he posits in there, and that he suggests, I again, that are so problematic and just so striking, and really, would contribute to ageism and the notions of, again, how older adults are such a problem. And
right.
to seek to say that the way to solve this is to basically try to strip them of everything, that really
Yes.
shouldn't be much of a say they can have, that
Right.
once you, again, reach a certain age, you shouldn't be able to hold office.
Right.
And and the fact that, another component with this is that so many older adults are housing insecure. One of the things we're also working on at NCALL is the training series on safe and secure housing, and helping more older adults to achieve that, because with housing prices on the rise, I mean, and have
Mm-hmm.
some of the highest places they've been, people are, being displaced out of their homes, in such alarming and fast rates. And so to
Mm-hmm.
think that this group of people, which is, again, one of the largest, if not like the fastest growing group in our country right now, people 65
Mm-hmm.
and older, are dominantly just hoarding wealth and not allowing any, younger adults to, to earn their own wealth. It's absolutely ludicrous to see. And
It was, yeah, I agree with it. It's the other thing when you were saying something, you said something about it's dangerous because of so if you are a younger person who's not doing well and you see and you actually believe this and understand it was a law professor from Yale, we haven't said that enough, in the New York Times, which was just like, okay.
Right.
The other thing you were talking about division, but the other part about that is to sort of almost criminalize or make it possible for them to say it's okay for you to take this back because they've had a life.
Yes, yes. It's okay.
And that,
like it's what you should do. I mean, this is just a larger macro level of abuse of power and control, which is what perpetrators use that, and we hear all the time from our grantees and service providers and even police officers where perpetrators will say, like, they don't need, I mean, I took the money because they don't need it anymore. I need it more than they do. So it's a disregard of the fact that they have lived, earned, worked hard, saved for years to be in a place of having financial security or achieve financial independence, which is likely a goal for all of us, right? And so say for someone to say, like, it's okay for me to do this, these type of articles reinforce that. And again, it's adding gasoline to the fire of abuse.
Totally. Because the other part, the converse of what you were talking about is that there are all those people who have worked hard, who don't have a lot of money.
You're right.
And the little bit of money that they have may be in their house.
Yes.
But it's okay for you to take the house, or it's okay for you to take what little income they have to be able to support the life that they have and that they've struggled for so long. And, I remember when I saw your email and I was starting to I don't know, in my mind, my hair was on fire, quite frankly. And I was like, argh. And if you see me, you wonder where the hair went. Well, that's what happened. I guess what I was getting to was the idea that it is, yes, there are older people who have a lot of money. There are also I guess we're saying the same thing again, but what I was really like, so this is not the picture that I understand from my work, that older people, this is not the same thing. It's not even remotely the same thing. And it is what you were saying is like, this is somebody in a bubble who thinks all older people are basically, I hate to say this, but I think rich, white, and and comfortable or disproportionately comfortable and need to give up whatever they have.
Because like you said, and I think that's so important to highlight, is that the overwhelming majority of older adults, especially those who have been living through intersectionality and have been struggling with, although they've worked their whole lives, they still don't have enough, that these individuals who have done everything they're supposed to do, quote unquote, right? They have worked hard, they have been good stewards to their family, are still struggling to even get good health care, to be able to access the things that they need to. And if they have a change in health or, another circumstance that causes, everything, the bottom can fall out from underneath them.
Right.
And so, to think that these most vulnerable individuals who are facing rates of violence and abuse that really are not quite fully known because of a lack of research, are somehow in a position of taking away power from everybody who's under 60 or 65. It's really just shocking that, it's just shocking to me that
I know.
How can you really think that unless, like we said, you are in the ivory tower with the 1%, and this is all that you see, and that you are truly missing, the 99% or the vast majority who are struggling. That's why there's an Older Americans Act, right? That's why there are, because of these disadvantages and because of these immense challenges that, older adults are facing. What we know also about ageism, it happens from it's internalized, the intrapersonal level, all the way to the macro level. And when
Yeah.
policies are
Yeah.
imposed, and for someone who comes from Yale University, that's a law professor, that's Harvard trained as well, the voice has power, right? These are considered the
Yes.
top institutions. So it's really
Yes.
dangerous, as we say in the response piece, it's dangerous to have someone to pose this and have these suggestions and these claims about the problem that older adults are, because people will listen, and for it to be posted in the New York Times, well,
Right.
like these things shape consciousness, and they shape how
Right.
people see and do and treat others, and so this reinforces all that we're seeking to address and to ultimately stop, which is abuse in later life, elder abuse, violence, period. But particularly as we're focusing on older adults, it's so important that we respond to and speak up, when things like this come out. So I'm so glad that we're able
Yes.
to,
Yes.
collaborate and respond to this. And, even from just doing a Google search, saw that others were upset. I mean, as well, there were some other, just Reddit groups and other Substacks that address this issue that I saw. And I mean, on my in-call team, we talked about it as well. I mean, it was just the shock of like, how is this? How
I
is
yeah.
that was the biggest
Yeah.
shocker.
It was. I mean, if you, and the other thing that somebody else pointing out to me was like, and I think you were alluding to this as well. Yale Yale Law School trains people to lawyers to go on to the important positions in our society. And so it was just like, and I was like, oh, thank you for further depressing me. But you had to sort of take that in, this idea or consciousness about aging and ageism um, is flourishing in an institution like that. It really, I guess, for people looking at this, they're going to say, how much more outraged can these two be? But,
Yeah,
it, it really was stunning. It was,
it is. And I think it also speaks to, just the culture of things that are said and done from leadership at this time, it now is being normalized, and it's okay. It's okay to to make these claims. And so I do hope that this professor Samuel Moyn receives he's getting feedback about this. He has a book coming, to know that that there's pushback, and that there's some more research he needs to do. There's some more older adults he needs to meet. There's some stories he needs to hear. There's, a lot more he needs to understand before,
yeah.
publishing this book. I know it's, he has a book coming out, but before continuing on in this work. And for those who are, who for others who he's teaching, and for other students, just really being able to, realize how the impact of things like this that may seem like a one and done kind of thing, but
Right.
when it compounds, and it can shape and change consciousness from readers, from audiences, from students, that impacts our society and how we treat one another for years to come.
You know, this is why I love you, Victoria, because my reaction was similar to like when my grandmother would say, "Go and get my switch, because you're going to need a beat." But you're totally right. I mean, I think to be thoughtful and understand how important it is to support and uplift older people in our society
Yes.
so that they can continue to thrive and continue to contribute.
Yes.
The other thing about the fact that we have all this money is that we're continuing to contribute to the foundations of our society economically. So it's not like we're just, so it is so important. What I would ask you is for today's talk,
Mhm.
what do you want finally people to take away?
Well, I want people to take away just how important it is to recognize, honor, respect, be aware of the older adults in your life. You may be older adult yourself, or again, for me, I think of someone who's 50 and older, and to really think about the most vulnerable in your
Mhm.
communities. And as service providers, I'm sure many of your listeners are service providers in some capacity. That they really examine their outreach, their services. Think about how can we make what we're doing more accessible to more older adults. How can we, even if
Mhm.
you're not doing victim services work, but if you are in some way, so if you're a home healthcare worker, if you are working with Meals on Wheels or you're connected with them, all the ways that you can serve older adults. So if you're a faith leader, how can you make what you do more accessible to more older adults? And how can you really touch and reach the most vulnerable in your community? And who can I work with to reach them as well? And we talked earlier about how important collaboration is, partnership. And so, to really create a more healing and just society and ultimately to stop abuse in later life and elder abuse from happening, we have to work together. And we also have to, just be really conscious about what we believe about age. We just talked about that,
Mhm.
right? And how what we read can shape that. So, have a critical lens of things when you read them and think about your own, just thoughts and notions about what it means to be the age you are and what does it mean to be,
Mhm.
what will it mean for how should I be when I'm 20 years from now? Are there thoughts
Mhm.
about what I should wear? You don't wear this after this age, or where I should or shouldn't be, or if I must retire at this age, or whatever, really, really being aware of that. So I also want to, there to be a takeaway of, that like red car theory that, once you see a red car or someone points it out to you, now wherever you go, you see them to
Right.
activate what's called your reticular nervous system. So, when you're
Yeah.
made aware of something, you then notice it. So I really want that to
Yeah.
happen, that your listeners will notice, be much more sensitive to, aware of older adult needs, and how you can better meet them. And then finally, to speak up and call out ageism, wherever you can, as we sought to do with this response to the article, but to talk about this issue, to learn more about how, the struggles that older adults have. But even in jokes that people say, it says, hey, let's think
Mhm.
about that. What does that really mean when you say that? Just more of
Right.
a consciousness and an awareness of what we're saying, what we're doing, and the impacts that it has. Because we think that our words, you just say something in jest or it's just funny, but they're very important and they shape what we believe, think, see, and do. And for others as well, and our children. And so, really being conscious of that, what we're saying, what we're doing, what we're thinking, that ultimately is a part of the solution of helping older adults and not part of the problem of continuing abuse in later life and elder abuse.
Wonderful. Thank you so much.
Thank you. I'm so glad that we're able to do this.
Yes, I want to do some more.
Yes, yes,
So
yes, yes.
thank you.